Welcome back to Clearcut. I'm Tal Henrik in for Michelle McCory. Let's get your business news. U.S. stocks inched higher to close out the week. The Nasdaq gaining about 0.1%, the Dow rising 0.25%, and the S&P was up fractionally. Before heading off for the 4th of July holiday, President Trump celebrated the economy and his tax cut. The president says he unleashed an economic miracle with the cut. The tax law gives generous tax cuts for corporations and the wealthiest Americans and more modest cuts for most middle and low-income individuals and families.
We have billions and billions of dollars of additional revenue coming in. We lowered the corporate tax rate, so the American worker finally has a level playing field.
Analysts are mixed about the tax cuts' impact on America's economic strength. Now let's bring in our senior Washington correspondent Dan Raviv to discuss it further. And Dan, first, fill us in. What was the president celebrating exactly?
A half anniversary, 6 months since Congress passed the tax cuts that he and the Republicans want to remind us about. They consider it the biggest triumph that Congress has achieved since they got control of the House of Representatives, the Senate, and the White House. Now, according to the president, as you heard, it's been an economic miracle that the American economy is stronger than ever, and he says American workers are benefiting. Indeed, there are critics who say that average hourly wages are not going up, that basically it's the big corporations and stockholders who are benefiting, and truly a lot of American workers, although their paychecks are a little bit fatter so far this year, they're wondering what it'll look like when they file their tax returns, typically April of next year. President Trump tried to give an answer. He said a typical family earning $75,000 will see a $2,000 tax cut. A lot of folks are saying, okay, let's see, Tal.
But what about the trade and tariff fights with other countries? Did the president talk about them?
Yes, he did, and only in positive ways. He said because of steel, aluminum, and solar panel tariffs, the American steel industry is booming. America is making more washing machines and solar panels. And so he said these are signs of health. And he said other countries are getting in touch because of the tariffs, saying, let's negotiate. He said they didn't used to do that. And so he thinks the U.S. is dealing from a position of strength. As you see, Tal, the president had a chance to boast about the economy. He, of course, did not mention in any way the critics who fear that tariffs can be very dangerous. They're really like taxes, and if there are not good resolutions through negotiations, then Americans will end up paying more for imported products. That could cause inflation, and maybe even voters wouldn't like it. Tal?
And Dan, the World Trade Organization is also making headlines, reports suggesting the president wants to take the United States out of the group. What's the administration saying about this so far?
As you know, Tal, early in the morning, some of the international stock markets went down because of that report that Trump wants to quit the WTO. Yes, Trump's made no secret of the fact that he doesn't like the world trade rules. He thinks they're unfair to the United States. Now, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin was asked about this, and he said the reports are an exaggeration. Also, President Trump's well-known advisor, Kellyanne Conway, she was asked, and actually her answers aren't quite so soothing. She said that when it comes to international organizations, they're all under review, and that it's time that America should stop paying the bill for a lot of other people participating in things that are not in our best interests. She even mentioned the NATO military alliance, that's under review. And keep in mind, President Trump is going to a NATO summit in Brussels, Belgium, in just under 2 weeks. Tal?
All under review. Well, she did not mention the United Nations. Dan Raviv, thank you for this. All right, joining us now to discuss it and more is Ibong Eka, a global markets analyst. Ibong, let's start with the WTO. How important is the United States to this organization, and what would it mean if the U.S. pulls out of it?
Well, it would actually allow the U.S. to stay more in a controlling position for themselves as well as for the nation. Now, what people are failing to notice with regards to what Trump says, especially with other governing bodies, is by having a very tight and firm grasp on what he wants to have happen, a lot of the nations, a lot of the organizations are willing to come to the table, as you mentioned in the previous Dan had mentioned previously. Now, you're going to see a lot more countries, as well as WTO, coming to the table to discuss whether or not the U.S. is getting a fair shake and if there are things that can be done to make it more equitable for the U.S. at large.
Let's talk some Bitcoin. The downward continues. Prices are falling down, and some headlines are reading the bubble will burst in 2018. What are your thoughts?
I mean, why are we surprised with this? It's like there's death, there's taxes, and there's Bitcoin bubble happening. We knew this from the beginning. There was really no substance to the run-up to begin with. While everybody's running around trying to find the next Bitcoin or other cryptocurrency ICOs to go after, there's nothing substantial behind Bitcoin. Now, I'm not talking about the technology. Technology of blockchain has been around for a few years. Major companies are using blockchain and supply chain as well as other areas of their business. But I'm speaking with regards to cryptocurrency, and there's no support behind it. You have sovereign risk being an issue in terms of other countries saying, like Japan or Korea, saying you're no longer allowed to use crypto to buy certain things. In the UK, you can't use cryptocurrency to even buy a home. You have to be able to prove where it's coming from. So there are a lot of different issues with regards to cryptocurrency that there's nothing substantiating it. So I'm not really surprised. Now, you're seeing a drop now. Earlier today, it was about 6,000. Now, last time I checked, maybe a few hours ago, it was at 58.82. And I'm not surprised if it'll go straight to zero at some point.
Zero. Oh, all right. We'd write it down. Is it time to buy pharmacy stocks as pharmacies get Amazoned? How are you reading this move? Is it one more proof that Amazon is serious about entering the healthcare market?
Amazon is the 800-pound gorilla in the room, or the big elephant, or whatever term you want to use to describe the behemoth of Amazon. And the market actually responded as well, where some of the other healthcare stocks went down by about 9%, give or take, after the news was announced that Amazon was going to buy PillPack for about $1 billion, which actually I think is a steal, mainly because it allows Amazon to get into the business of delivering drugs and pharmacy. And they've been thinking about getting into the drug business for a while. They're partnering with Berkshire Hathaway, and I can't remember the other company, to create their own healthcare company for all their employees. Now, we already know Amazon's great with logistics. I mean, they can deliver something same day in many cases, depending on where you live. Now, imagine if you could do the same thing for pharmaceutical drugs as well as your medicines and the like.
Good point. And today was the official last day for Toys R Us. It's a sad story. How did it go? How many stores closed?
I can't remember how many stores closed, but I think all of them did. And one thing I want to say about Toys R Us is it's not really a surprise, just like Bitcoin. And here's why. You're seeing this with a lot of major retailers. They were heavily in non-cash producing assets like lease or huge leases, huge stores. I no longer have to go to Amazon, or sorry, I no longer have to go to Toys R Us to buy toys, because you know what's going to happen? Children go online, they watch YouTube, they watch television, and then they go online themselves, use their iPad, or they use their mom's cell phone, and they buy the toy right off online. I no longer have to touch it, feel it, and get acquainted with the actual toy anymore. And a lot of these companies like Sears and Toys R Us, Dick's, a lot of other sporting goods companies, they're actually missing the boat with online retailing.
So who's going to buy all these toys? Will it be Amazon, maybe?
Well, I think
the toys, the stores.
With regards to the toys, I mean, it's going to be a fire sale. I think maybe they'll sell it to Walmart at a discount because they have to get all this inventory off the books. And I mean, worst case scenario, they'll have a fire sale in the parking lot of the once empty mall.
How's the market reacting to the looming trade war?
Well, I think we mentioned earlier the Dow and the S&P kind of fluctuated a little bit, and what you're seeing basically is some investors are worried, and so they're pulling their money out of U.S. equities and they're putting it more into stocks that are a little bit more substantial, that actually provide even a better yield, like dividends, maybe even in the bond market as well. So that's what you're seeing. No one's really pulling their money out of the market and putting it in a mattress. What they're doing is they're repositioning and doing another strategy. Now, just like very similar with the WTO and what Trump's doing, the same thing's happening with the trade war and tariffs. Everybody's stomping their feet. Everybody's swinging around their bats. But at the end of the day, the U.S. literally is the largest market in the world, and everybody wants to do business with the U.S. As a matter of fact, Europe, a lot of companies in Europe are actually concerned about, like, for example, Volkswagen. Volkswagen is concerned because a lot of their exports for their cars they're made and they come to the U.S. And so they're willing to work with the U.S. as well as some other countries as well who may suffer because of the tariffs and the trade war.
All right, Ibong Eka, global market analyst, we appreciate you being on the show tonight. And speaking of trade wars, Canada hit back at the United States over its new steel and aluminum tariffs today. The Canadians vowing to impose tariffs on $12.5 billion worth of American goods. It's the latest round of trade rhetoric between America and one of its biggest trading partners. Our New York bureau chief Steve Langford reports from the U.S.-Canada border.
About a half mile of water and a lot of history both separate and unite Detroit, Michigan, and Windsor, Ontario, the Detroit River over the centuries, the nexus of vast cross-border trade, legal and otherwise, from fur trading in the 17th and 18th centuries to liquor smuggling during Prohibition to the auto industry today, all subject through the years to the ebb and flow of commerce, international relations, tariffs, and politics.
We're going to put a little tariff on your cars coming in. You know, cars are the biggie.
The Trump administration, having already slapped import taxes on Canadian steel and aluminum, has threatened to put a 25% tariff on all imported cars. The president declaring in late May, quote, "There will be big news coming for our great American automakers. After many decades of losing your jobs to other countries, you have waited long enough." Trump has also talked openly about scrapping NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement that has propelled the merging of the economies of Detroit and Windsor over the past quarter century. Erecting a wall of tariffs along the U.S.-Canada border here ignores the reality of just how intermeshed the two economies are here. Michigan here has been called Canada's 11th province, and Windsor, here on the Canadian side, might as well be a suburb of Detroit.
We're great friends, we're great trading partners. The relationship has been a very strong relationship for hundreds of years. And this war and this trade war and this fight is really all for nothing.
Drew Dilkins is the mayor of Windsor, a city in which the Fiat Chrysler Canada plant here is the biggest local employer, with 6,000 people working 3 shifts, 7 days a week, building cars that are mostly sold in America. The arrangement, a model of free trade, now suddenly in jeopardy.
It would be terrible for our economy, but it would also be terrible for the state of Michigan and the Metro Detroit region as well, because of that tight integration of both of our economies.
The ultimate result will be more expense to you and I as consumers of automobiles. The tariffs alone for just the Canada is already predicted to be around $5,000 extra per car that the consumer will see.
$5,000 more per imported car, not to mention higher tariffs on parts for vehicles made in America. One of the giants of the global auto industry tells I24NEWS he's not sweating it yet.
You know, we believe that free trade is good trade, and we do think NAFTA could be modernized, but you know, we deal with trade issues every day of our existence all around the world, so this is nothing new.
Ford may be less exposed because it builds fewer cars in Canada. But for GM and especially Chrysler, which makes close to a quarter of its cars for the American market in Canada, import tariffs would mean higher prices, job losses, a drop in sales, and fewer American car exports. The Alliance of Automobile Manufacturers warned in recent days.
This is going to mess up the supply chain for the automotive industry beyond consideration.
Dr. Alfie Morgan, professor emeritus at the University of Windsor Business School, says building cars in this area with vehicles and parts going back and forth across the border as part of the manufacturing process would make calculating tariffs next to impossible.
How are you going to price that? How are you going to impose tariffs? Are you going to impose tariffs on it 20, 30 times then every time it crosses and comes back?
For 150 years, Canada has been the United States' most steadfast ally.
The Trudeau government has announced it will retaliate starting Sunday, July 1st, Canada Day, by imposing close to $13 billion in tariffs on American products including steel, aluminum, ketchup, and toilet paper.
It doesn't really benefit anyone. It only kind of strokes a couple of egos here and there, I feel, and everyone's going to end up paying more for the products that they've already been paying for in the past.
On the streets of downtown Windsor, growing unease.
We're the closest economic connection of any country in the world.
I worry about going over in the States right now, being Canadian, and what sort of repercussions that could have.
The waters of the mighty Detroit suddenly roiled as America's northern border, long known for its bridges, now faces the prospect of barriers. In Windsor, Ontario, Steve Langford, I24 News.
Coming up, the team behind the search. We talked to a member of the IDF's elite Bedouin tracking unit about their most famous cases in recent memory. Plus, women behind the wheel of Israeli tanks, the new program that's breaking barriers. That's coming up on Clearcut.